Hey, what's going on, Warhammer World? This is Obsidian Anubis, and I'm back with another Ninth Age battle report. So this is Game 4 of the OFCC. So this is Day 2. I just came off the first day with a 20-0s and one 5-15 loss. So I was doing pretty well, pretty pumped for going into the second day, and I got paired up with an Empire player. So this particular Empire player, which you can see the army, I thought the army looked fantastic. This is who I voted for best paint. It was really similar to my other army. If you guys have ever seen my earlier videos, I played Empire a lot, so it was kind of really nice to see another Empire player and to see one that was very similar to my own game style. And to be honest here, this army is both the army I wanted to play the most because I also play Empire, but it was also the army I didn't want to play because I felt like it had all the tools it needed to beat my army that I brought. So yeah, so both positive and negative, but I was really excited to go into this game. So if you haven't seen my list is a brush and fluff video too. I posted it right before all the other OFCC games. So if you have not yet seen that, I encourage you to go back and look at that, and that will go through my army as well. All right, so let's go and meet my opponent's army though. So in this deployment, it was the diagonal deployment, and my opponent, having the range advantage, obviously parked most of his troops farther back than he needed to. But it was a good call from my opponent. So here we have 5 knights, as you can see. Behind them are a group of 3 knights of the Sun Griffin. And then next to them is a 20 heavy infantry with a banner. And next to that is 5 readers. And then in the back in the forest, you can see that my opponent has a cannon, and a volley gun, and then there's an artificer in between those two. And then on the right side, my opponent has a steam tank, which is a marvelous steam tank. I don't know if that's an older version or if that's just a custom-made one, but I think it looks fantastic. Behind that is a group of 40 halberdiers with full command, as well as a BSB. He's on the front left. I don't know what he has other than being the BSB. It didn't really matter. Behind them is a group of 10 light infantry with a level 2 heavens with a dispel scroll. Behind that is a mortar. And then next to that he has the war altar with the prelate. He has a 4-up ward save and the Laka Asuna. In front of that is a group of 30 flagellants. And then next to that is a group of 5 knights. So on my left flank, I have my Iron Orcs with my Iron Orc Chief, who is a wizard thanks to the Wizarding Hood. Next to them is my large group of Cave Goblins, and then my 5 Forest Goblins, my big Gargantua Spider hiding behind the rock, along with my Feral Giant. And then on my right flank, I have my big Feral Horde with my General and BSB inside there. Behind them is my 5 Boar Boys with my Wizard. To the right, I have my Skirmish Goblins, which so far have not been doing a whole lot during this game, and then in the back I have my Git Launcher. So for magic, because I have the Wizarding Hood, I randomly roll a spell, my lore, and I end up rolling Wilderness. So I had 2 level 2 Wilderness. So one had Swarm of Insects and the Redwood Shaft, and the Beast Within. Oh, sorry, excuse me. One had Swarm of Insects and the Beast Within, and one had the Redwood Shaft and the Beast Within. So both my wizards had the Beast Within, which I thought would help me in this game, hopefully. So my opponent dropped his entire army off first, so he obviously got the first turn. For secondary objectives, we were playing Capture the Flag. I think that's what it's called as well. You've named 3 flags other than your BSB. If you lose one, then if you have more than your opponent by the end of the game, you get the secondary objective points. So this was Vanguard, and then Empire of Sonnstahl, turn 1. So on the left side, he kind of moved up his chaff, which he's using his his chaffs in this one, and his archers. On the right side, you can see he also moved up Steam Tank and his archers and his other group of knights. In Magic Phase, he got the Stars Align off on his mortar. He also miscast this, so he ended up blowing, I think, 7 of his gunners up and putting a wound on his wizard, so it was a fair trade. Unfortunately, they did hold, they didn't panic, and they stayed on the board. In Shooting Phase, that spell really helped. He targeted my Feral Orcs and killed off 10. Ouch! 10 Feral Orcs in 1 mortar hit. That hurt. Plus, he also put a wound on my general as well. So that really definitely took a chunk out of my army. That's one of the reasons why I was afraid to fight this opponent, is his shooting. And ouch, that definitely hurt. You can see my Feral Giant took 2 wounds. I believe he hit it with a cannon and did minimum, but 2 wounds to it nonetheless. And that brings us to Sharnuks Horde turn 1. So my battle plan is get in combat as quick as I can. So I moved up my Ferals as fast as I could. Moved up my Spider and my Giant, trying to keep the rock more or less somewhat covering them so that my opponent can only shoot 1 cannon at a time at them. On my left flank, I moved up my Spiders to see if I could get rid of that small group of chaffs, so that way when I release my Madgets, they could go towards the Steam Tank without having to worry about the archers. In Magic Phase, I managed to get the Beast Within off on my Feral Orcs, just to give them a little bit stronger toughness, and in case my opponent decided to charge with his Flagellants or anything next turn. But on that, that was the end of it. So that takes us to Empire of Sonnstahl, turn 2. So movement phase, sorry about the blurry picture, my opponent actually didn't move too much. He pretty much more or less stood even. Kind of just moved his troops around a little bit, not too much. You can see my opponent's moving his knights here to chaff up my Iron Orcs and moving his Readers around and start picking at them. You can see that my spiders took off 2 of the archers last turn, but unfortunately they passed the panic test. And on this side, you can see that my opponent is also using these knights to chaff up, and then he has his flagellants ready to hit my flank if I overrun, which, being feral orcs, I will have to overrun. I think this is after shooting. My opponent peeled off a couple more guys after shooting, and that brings us to Sharnuks Horde, turn 2. Well, I'm an orc. I got to take some combat, right? So I charged my Iron Orcs into the knights. Well, actually, my Spider Riders got shot last turn and they ran away. I have one spider left who's somewhere in this forest, I believe. I moved up my Cave Goblins just so they could get within 8 inches of the Steam Tank and maybe start popping off a few wounds. I also charged my Feral Giant into his other archer detachment. You can just see it here on the right side of this picture. He hit it with another cannon last turn and did 2 more wounds, so he just has 2 more wounds he's clinging to. On the right hand side, I decided to charge my general out of the unit into the knights, because I knew that if I did charge with the entire unit, I would break them, or I would overrun, and then my opponent would easily get a flank charge and easily wipe out that unit. So I just decided just to have my general charge out of the unit and take on those knights. In Magic Phase, I managed to get the Beast Within off on my Feral Orcs one more time. And then in close combat, yeah, my giant easily killed the 4 knights. Well, I think he actually killed 3 of them. The last one broke. I chased, overran, and caught him and destroyed him. Unfortunately, I was still on the board. I wish I would have rolled like a little inch or so more so I could have got him off the board. In combat with my Feral Giant, my giant did terrible. I mean, giants are kind of wonky. Sometimes they can do a lot of wounds. Sometimes they can do no wounds. In this case, he did 1 wound. He did the one where he picks up a guy and shoves him down his pants. So not as great as I would have liked, but oh well. On the left-hand side of this board, I didn't take a picture, but my Iron Orcs broke the knights, and I elected not to pursue and just turned to face. So that brings us to Empire of Sonnstahl, turn 3. So in movement phase, he just decided to move his flagellants around. He didn't want to charge into my general because I would leave him open for a countercharge with my ferals. He decided to move his steam tank back in this turn, so you can see that the steam tank is actually facing the wrong direction. So yeah, he decided to turn it around and move it back towards his lines. He thought it was getting a little too close to mine. Oh, sorry, I must have failed my stupidity test last turn on my Iron Orcs, so that's why they didn't charge. So there was a couple turns where I failed my stupidity test because I have the Wizarding Hood, and I'm outside of my BSB's range, so I didn't get the reroll. So sorry, last turn I failed my stupidity test with my Iron Orcs. You can see that my opponent is moving his archers to chaff up and then to make me release my fanatics next turn if I don't, when I throw them out. In shooting phase, my opponent used his cannon and targeted my general, and yeah, he sniped him. I tried for my 6-up ward save, but nope, I didn't get it, and he died. In close combat, my giant finally wiped out the rest of the little hobbits, sending them back to the Moot or the Shire or wherever they come from. And that brings us to Sharnuks Horde, turn 3. Alright, so this turn I decided to charge in with my Iron Orcs into the Knights, and then in movement phase I elected to do a quick reform and shuffle my goblins as close as I could get to the steam tank, because I know I was going to release fanatics this turn because the archers were right there, so I figured would try to get as close as I could to the war machine, the steam tank before I send them out. I also charged my giant into my opponent's flagellants. Was this the best idea? Probably not, but honestly he was going to get shot next turn and killed anyways, so there wasn't really much to do with them anyway at this point. In Magic Phase, I managed to get once more the Beast Within off on my Feral Orcs. It really helps when I had 2 wizards casting the same spell, because either or one of them is going to get it off. My opponent also, so I said he miscast on his first turn. He actually miscast again on his second turn and sucked his wizard into the void, as well as deleting the light troops with the guns off. So I'm actually up a banner now because my opponent wiped out one of his own banners, and he doesn't have a wizard with his spell scroll anymore. So every turn I can usually get at least 1 spell off, which is pretty good. Yeah, in close combat with the Sharnuks, as I said, I broke the knights. You can see the one remaining on the top left of this picture running away, and I elected just to reform to face those incoming Griffin knights should they decide to charge in. In shooting phase, I released my 3 fanatics. As you can see, they went through the steam tank, only doing 1 wound, sadly, and they went through the halberdiers and killed quite a few. You can see that my opponent's war alto has taken 2 wounds. That's because my Get Launcher is shooting at it every turn, and I usually, so far I've hit it I think twice, and I've done a wound each time, so I'm slowly getting it down, but at this rate I probably won't finish it by the end of the game. But you never know, I might get lucky. So that brings us to Empire the sonnstahl, turn 4. So in this turn he moved his steam tank up back towards my lines, moved his archers in front of my goblins again, and then on his left flank he put his readers once more in the way to clog up my iron orcs, and moved his griffin knights to take the flank of my goblins if I charge the archers. So here's just a picture of what it kind of looks like overall. In shooting phase, my opponent didn't have much to shoot at. All my big monsters were farther away, so I think his cannon just took a shot at iron orcs or something and didn't do anything. And then the rest of his range was pretty much out. I think he shot my goblins with the mortar and killed a 10 or so, but the goblins, they die in a dozen anyways, so I don't really worry about it. So that brings us to Sharnuks Horde, turn 4. Alright, so this is what it looks like, and once more I decide to charge my iron orcs into the readers, because I passed my stupidity test, I believe. I elect not to charge my goblins into the archers. I actually just do a reform, so I'm facing the griffin, so if they come in, they'll at least be in my front. I attempted to charge my feral orcs into my opponent's flagellants, but that was a 11-inch charge, and I didn't have my general with the wog anymore, so I failed that. In magic phase, I did manage to get the redwood shaft off on my opponent's steam tank and did 2 more wounds, so it's now taken 3 wounds. And yeah, here's a picture of me reforming my goblins, and this is actually taken after close combat, because you can see that my iron orcs have wiped out my opponent's readers and are now turning to take the flank of the griffins. On the right hand side, you can see that my fanatics in the back have moved around a little bit. One went through the flagellants, the other went towards the war machines, and I think put 1 wound on the volley gun. You can see that my goblin skirmishers are moving up, and they're just double throwing the tomahawks at the flagellants. And so far, they've actually shot off about 10 flagellants because they don't have any armor. I mean, I need most of the time 5s and 5s, but when I have more or less 40 shots headed their direction, I can usually peel off a couple a turn. So they're doing pretty good. So that brings us to Empire of the Sonnstahl, turn 5. So my opponent decided to charge in with his steam tank into the flank of my iron orcs. He elected not to charge in with either his flagellants or his halberdiers because he wanted to give it a turn for my orc unruly +1 strength to wear off for the first turn. On the left-hand flank, he decided he did not want to go into the goblins with his griffin knights because I would just be steadfast and hopefully pass, and then counter flank him with the iron orcs. So he just kind of slipped through the gap between those two and started coming behind my lines. Yeah, in close combat phase, you can see I lost probably 4 or 5 iron orcs to his steam tank, and I don't think I put a wound back, but I easily passed my break test and we're all steady there, hanging out. So that brings us to Sharnuks Horde, turn 5. Alright, so I decided to charge my Gargantula into the steam tank. I figured if anything had a chance of breaking it, it would. I also elected to charge my remaining Night Goblins, because they got hit with a mortar last turn, into the Swordsman. Was this a good idea? Probably not, but they were going to get shot to pieces anyways, so I figured I might as well get in close combat, at least they can maybe do a little damage on their turn. In the backfield, I moved my Boar Boys around to get ready for those incoming griffins. I also used my last Spider Rider, which I did happen to rally on double ones. So you can't see him in this picture, he's slightly below the picture, but he's actually chaffing up the Griffin Knights, so if they charge, they'll expose their flank. I also moved the skirmishers up towards the, kind of to get in the way and clog up that little gap, and then just throw more tomahawks at the flagellants. You can see my fanatics are still running around wildly. One is by the mortar, one is behind the halberdiers, and the other one actually went through his general, and I think put another wound on his general. So he's now taken 4 wounds, I believe, at this point. So he has 1 wound remaining. In magic phase, I managed to get the swarm of insects off from the iron orc. I threw this at the volley gun, and I wiped out the volley gun. So that was a plus. And that brings us to Empire of Sonnstahl, turn 6. Well, surprisingly, last turn I actually only lost one goblin and did a couple wounds to my opponent, so I actually won combat last turn, but my opponent obviously easily stood with the BSB and the general pretty close by, but I was surprised that they actually did manage to hold on last turn. Here's the Griffinites charging the remaining Chaff Spider. And then my opponent decided to charge his Flagellants and his general through the Fanatic, which is now dead, into the goblins with the skirmish goblins, and I elected to just stand and shoot and throw as many tomahawks as I could at the Flagellants. And then he attempted to charge his halberdiers into my feral orc horde, and he needed a 7. He rolled a 6. He was off by 1 because I think it was 11 inches and they moved 4, so he needed a 7. So he statistically average he should get it, but he rolled just below average and he failed. I actually kind of felt, I felt bad for my opponent that they didn't make it in because he should have made it in, but I'm glad they didn't make it in because they probably would have wiped out my ferals. But on the other side, my ferals can do quite a bit of damage, so if he actually had charged in, I may have done quite a bit of damage back to him because I still was frenzied because I had war paint, so I would never lose my frenzy. So I still had 3 attacks from those guys in the front rank, and as if you've seen my previous video, they can do a lot of damage, especially if I can get beats within off on them. So I don't know. We'll never know what would happen, but it's probably best that they didn't make it in. In close combat, yeah, he easily wiped out my goblins and overran. His general just missed my feral orcs. I think I managed to put 1 more wound onto the steam tank, giving it a total of 3 wounds now, but other than that, couldn't do anything. And then over here, my goblins decided to break this turn. My opponent my opponent attempted to restrain, failed, and so I ended up chasing the goblins. So I have a nice counterflank right there with my iron orcs on turn 6. And that brings us to turn 6 for the Sharnuks horde. Alright, so I would have liked to have declared quite a few charges on this turn, but things didn't always work out the way you want them to. My iron orcs failed their stupidity test because of the hood, so they did not charge the swordsman, unfortunately. If they had, and I broke them, I would have destroyed 2 of my opponent's banners, so I would have had the secondary objective points. As it is, I got 1 because my opponent lost his light infantry, but my opponent got my goblins. So it was a tie on secondary objective points, sadly. And then the charge which I didn't want to make, so my feral orc boar boys with my wizard, they charged the Knights of the Sun Griffin. I didn't want to do that, but they frenzied. I failed my frenzy test, and they decided to charge in. So they went in, they got wiped out. My feral orcs and the Jeff Spider were still locked in an endless combat with the steam tank, and that is how actually the game ends. So we tallied up points. When I was tallying up points, I was I'm like, what? They're okay. I lost that, so my opponent gets that. But I actually didn't lose nearly as many points as I thought I had. And so when I finished, I actually was just over 1,000 points that my opponent had gotten. So I walked it through with my opponent to make sure that I wasn't missing anything. And that's how it was. And my opponent was very similar. He lost just over 1,000 points. So it was actually a 10-10 draw since we both still had 2 banners. So this was actually a 10-10 draw, which I got to say, it was a relief to me. I thought when I was going into this battle, I thought I was going to get creamed. I thought it was going to be 0-20, and my opponent was just going to crush me because I felt like my opponent had all the right tools to kill everything I had brought to the table. So I was really surprised and really relieved that I got a 10-10 out of this. And honestly, I'm sorry if my other opponents watch this video, but I think this was my favorite game. Just because it was so close, it was neck and neck. I play both of these armies, so I really enjoy watching how both of them play. It was really close, and there's so many things that could have gone, but didn't quite happen because you just rolled slightly below my stupidity test. My opponent failing his charge distance. There's just a lot of quirky things which made this game, I think, really fun and really entertaining. So this put me actually on the top table after this. So I was in the lead going into the next turn, which I thought was quite surprising since this was my first tournament. I just came here just to play, so I found it quite interesting that I was actually in first place at the moment. But you have to wait for the next video to see how that turns out. But if you guys saw any mistakes or would like to leave any comments or suggestions, please put those in the comment section below. I'd love to hear them. Anything else? Yeah, if you guys could hit like and subscribe, that would be fantastic. And as always, game on.